Grazie. Collega
Thank you, Mr. Helmer, please.
Well, Madam Chairman, can I start by thanking our colleague Mr. Termes for planning out the future of energy supply in my country. I'm sure the people I represent will be very grateful for that. I'm sorry that my group is unable to agree with Mr. REUL's report, and we have tabled substantive amendments. The policy set out is probably unnecessary, certainly ineffectual, and ruinously expensive. If we wish to achieve our emissions targets, and I question whether we should, but if we do wish to achieve them, we could do it more cheaply, more affordably, and more reliably with a combination of nuclear and gas than we can with these playground technologies that are being recommended. They are inordinately expensive, both in capital and operating terms. They are driving up energy prices. They are making Europe less competitive. They are forcing households and pensioners into fuel poverty and therefore undermining social cohesion. They are driving energy-intensive business. You can laugh, Mrs. Hall, but this is happening. They are driving energy-intensive businesses offshore, out of the European Union altogether. Look at the steel industry. Look at France. You know what's going on. We in Britain have just lost 900 jobs in the steel industry explicitly because of energy prices. Thank you, Mr. Termes. You have had your say. Now let me have mine. We are undermining European competitiveness at a time when the United States of America has cheap gas and is set to become the new manufacturing hub of the world, when China and India have cheap coal. We talk about competitiveness in Europe, but we cannot achieve it with these prices. Now, colleagues seem to be entirely unaware of the emerging evidence from a number of European countries, but perhaps most notably from Professor Gordon Hughes at the University of Edinburgh, that in fact renewable technologies, and I'm thinking particularly of wind and solar, do not make a net contribution to electricity generation, do not reduce the consumption of fossil fuels, and do not cut emissions, which is, I understand, their main purpose. Now, I can see, by the way, that Mrs. Hall is laughing for the benefit of the audience, that she doesn't agree. And I would agree, Mrs. Hall, that these conclusions are counterintuitive. But the reason for them is very simple, that the wind and the sun are both intermittent and unpredictable, and therefore they require conventional backup. The conventional backup has to be run also intermittently to complement the wind or the sun. And running gas, it usually is gas, running gas intermittently is profoundly inefficient and expensive. So that if you look at the inefficiencies of running the backup, what you find is that the savings you thought you were making with your renewables are offset by the inefficiencies in the backup. So we are spending huge amounts of money in the belief that we are reducing emissions, when in fact we are failing to do so. All we are doing is destroying our economy, mortgaging our children and bankrupting our grandchildren. I have to tell you, colleagues, that renewables are simply not sustainable. Now, I do not imagine for a moment that I will convince you of that proposition, but I tell you this, the markets will convince you of that proposition. Already in America, the markets are driving emissions down, not ridiculous, onerous, expensive regulations such as we have in Europe. Tell me, how is it that America is reducing emissions more effectively than Europe, despite having a much looser regulatory framework? The answer is markets. The answer is gas. And unless we get on to the gas revolution here in Europe, then I dread to think what will happen to our economy. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, I'm following this debate with a great deal of interest. It's a very rich debate, and Mr. Helmer's speech doesn't make me laugh at all. I take it very seriously. I think the truth does not come out of dogmatic impositions, but through critical analysis of the different elements of a problem. And this one is certainly a very complex problem. So we have to analyze it very objectively and coolly. In the EU, we've decided that renewable energy has to be a substantial component in our energy mix for the obvious reasons that we all know about. Security of supply, reducing emissions. However, There are difficulties associated with this, which are very serious. First of all, renewables are not currently competitive, so they need support of all different types, and there are so many of them in Europe. These support mechanisms come from governments. The benefits are there, but we mustn't forget those. One of them is quite rightly underlined by Mr. Helmer, the problem of integrating renewables into our single market has not been resolved. That is one of the outstanding problems, and Mr. Helmer is right that that needs to be resolved. Of course, these sources are subsidized. Aid to RES is currently causing major distortions in European markets. In my country, there is a dramatic situation because the government is now forced to bring in new legislation about energy taxation, which is actually jeopardizing the very survival of some industrial sectors and some energy companies. So we shouldn't in any way play down the problem of renewables. In Spain, this fashion or massive investment in renewables is almost making the whole energy mix unviable. So it's a very serious matter. Renewables can contribute to the energy mix, but need to be on an equal footing with other energy sources. This level playing field is one of the pillars of the single market. And then there's the question of intermittent supply. If we need backup sources of energy, then that pushes up the kilowatt-hour price. That is undeniable, and it's something that we need to address. So then, I think Mr. Royal's report is very useful. It highlights the problems very objectively and correctly. So we have to bring in renewables in a way that's compatible with security of supply. We have to have prices for renewables that are competitive, and once and for all, we have to create a single market in energy.
Thank you